Where are the Sodder children? For nearly 4 decades, anyone driving down Route 16 near Fayetteville, West Virginia, could see a billboard bearing the grainy images of 5 children, all dark-haired and solemn-eyed. Their names and ages: Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louise, 9, Jennie, 8, Betty, 5. Welcome back to another episode of Spooky Hunt, the home of all things scary and hair-raising on YouTube. From the most thought-provoking unsolved mysteries to the creepiest ghosts and ghouls, we have all the spooky content you will ever need. Subscribe to the channel now so you never miss any of our latest and greatest videos. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the case of the Sodder children. Let's get to it. Fayetteville was and is a small town with a main street that doesn't run longer than 100 yards. And rumors always played a larger role in the case than evidence. No one even agreed on whether the children were dead or alive. What everyone knew for certain was this: on the night before Christmas, 1945, George and Jennie Sodder and 9 of their 10 children went to sleep. One son was away in the army. Around 1 a.m., a fire broke out. George and Jennie and 4 of their children escaped, but the other 5 were never seen again. George had tried to save them, breaking a window to re-enter the house, slicing a swath of skin from his arm. He could see nothing through the smoke and fire, which had swept through all of the downstairs rooms, living and dining room, kitchen, office, and his and Jennie's bedroom. He raced back outside, hoping to reach them through the upstairs windows, but the ladder he always kept propped against the house was strangely missing. An idea struck. He would drive one of his 2 coal trucks up to the house and climb atop it to reach the windows. But even though they'd functioned perfectly the day before, neither would start now. He ransacked his mind for another option. He tried to scoop water from a rain barrel, but found it frozen solid. 5 of his children were stuck somewhere inside those great whipping ropes of smoke. He didn't notice that his arm was slick with blood, that his voice hurt from screaming their names. His daughter, Marion, sprinted to a neighbor's home to call the Fayetteville Fire Department, but couldn't get any operator response. A neighbor who saw the blaze made a call from a nearby tavern, but again, no operator responded. Exasperated, the neighbors drove into town and tracked down the fire chief, F.J. Maurice, who initiated Fayetteville's version of a fire alarm, a phone tree system, whereby one firefighter phoned another, who phoned another. The fire department was only 2.5 miles away, but the crew didn't arrive until 8 a.m., by which point the Sodders' home had been reduced to a smoking pile of ash. George and Jennie assumed that 5 of the children were dead, but a brief search of the grounds on Christmas Day turned up no trace of remains. Chief Morris suggested that the blaze had been hot enough to completely cremate the bodies. A state police investigator combed through the rubble and attributed the fire to faulty wiring. George covered the basement with 5 feet of dirt, intending to preserve the site as a memorial. The coroner's office issued 5 death certificates just before the new year, attributing the causes to fire or suffocation. But the Sodders had begun to wonder if their children were still alive. George Sodder was born 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞 in Tulu, Sardinia in 1895 and immigrated to the United States in 1908 when he was 13. He found work on the Pennsylvania railroads, carrying water and supplies to the laborers, and after a few years moved to Smithers, West Virginia. Smart and ambitious, he first worked as a driver and then launched his own trucking company, hauling dirt for construction and later freight and coal. One day, he walked into a local store called The Music Box and met the owner's daughter, Jennie Cipriani, who had come over from Italy when she was 3. They married and had 10 children between 1923 and 1943 and settled in Fayetteville, West Virginia, an Appalachian town with a small but active Italian immigrant community. The Sodders were, said one county magistrate, one of the most respected middle-class families around. George held strong opinions about everything from business to current events and politics, but was for some reason reticent to talk about his youth. He never explained what happened back in Italy to make him want to leave. The Sodders planted flowers across the space where their house had stood and began to stitch together a series of odd moments leading up to the fire. There was a stranger who appeared at the home a few months earlier, back in the fall, asking about hauling work. He meandered to the back of the house, pointed to 2 separate fuse boxes, and said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." Strange, George thought, especially since he had just had the wiring checked by the local power company. which pronounced it in fine condition. Around the same time, another man tried to sell the family life insurance and became irate when George declined. "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke," he warned, "and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." George was indeed outspoken about his dislike for the Italian dictator, occasionally engaging in heated arguments with other members of Fayetteville's Italian community, and at the time didn't take the man's threats seriously. The older Sodder sons also recalled something peculiar. Just before Christmas, they noticed a man parked along US Highway 21, intently watching the younger kids as they came home from school. Around 12:30 Christmas morning, after the children had opened a few presents and everyone had gone to sleep, the shrill ring of the telephone broke the quiet. Jennie rushed to answer it. An unfamiliar female voice asked for an unfamiliar name. There was raucous laughter and glasses clinking in the background. Jennie said, "You have the wrong number," and hung up. Tiptoeing back to bed, she noticed that all of the downstairs lights were still on and the curtains open. The front door was unlocked. She saw Marianne asleep on the sofa in the living room and assumed that the other kids were upstairs in bed. She turned out the lights, closed the curtains, locked the door, and returned to her room. She had just begun to doze when she heard one sharp, loud bang on the roof, and then a rolling noise. An hour later, she was roused once again, this time by heavy smoke curling into her room. Jennie couldn't understand how 5 children could perish in a fire and leave no bones, no flesh, nothing. She conducted a private experiment, burning animal bones, chicken bones, beef joints, pork chop bones, to see if the fire consumed them. Each time, she was left with a heap of charred bones. She knew that remnants of various household appliances had been found in the burned-out basement, still identifiable. An employee at a crematorium informed her that bones remain after bodies are burned for 2 hours at 2,000 degrees. Their house was destroyed in 45 minutes. The collection of odd moments grew. A telephone repairman told the Sodders that their lines appeared to have been cut, but not burned. They realized that if the fire had been electrical, the result of faulty wiring, as the official report stated, then the power would have been dead. So how to explain the lighted downstairs rooms? A witness came forward claiming he saw a man at the fire scene taking a block and tackle used for removing car engines. Could he be the reason George's truck refused to start? One day, while the family was visiting the site, Sylvia found a hard rubber object in the yard. Jennie recalled hearing the hard thud on the roof, the rolling sound. George concluded it was a napalm, pineapple bomb, of the type used in warfare. Then came the reports of sightings. A woman claimed to have seen the missing children peering from a passenger car while the fire was in progress. A woman operating a tourist stop between Fayetteville and Charleston, some 50 miles west, said she saw the children the morning after the fire. "I served them breakfast," she told police. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court too. A woman at a Charleston hotel saw the children's photos in a newspaper and said she had seen 4 of the 5 a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian extraction, she said in a statement. "I do not remember the exact date. However, the entire party did register at the hotel and stayed in a large room with several beds. They registered about midnight. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to these children. One of the men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began talking rapidly in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." Tinsley persuaded Maurice to show them the spot. Together, they dug up the box and took it straight to a local funeral director, who poked and prodded the heart and concluded it was beef liver, untouched by the fire. Soon afterward, the Sodders heard rumors that the fire chief had told others that the contents of the box had not been found in the fire at all, that he had buried the beef liver in the rubble and hoped that finding any remains would placate the family enough to stop the investigation. Over the next few years, the tips and leads continued to come. George saw a newspaper photo of school children in New York City and was convinced that one of them was his daughter Betty. He drove to Manhattan in search of the child, but her parents refused to speak to him. In August 1949, the Sodders decided to mount a new search at the fire scene and brought in a Washington, D.C. pathologist named Oscar B. Hunter. The excavation was thorough, uncovering several small objects, damaged coins, a partly burned dictionary, and several shards of vertebrae. Hunter sent the bones to the Smithsonian Institution, which issued the following report. The human bones consist of 4 lumbar vertebrae belonging to one individual. Since the transverse recesses are fused, the age of this individual at death should have been 16 or 17 years. The top limit of age should be about 22, since the centra, which normally fuse at 23, are still unfused. On this basis, the bones show greater skeletal maturation than one would expect for a 14-year-old boy, the oldest missing Sodder child. It is, however, possible, although not probable, for a boy 14.5 years old to show 16 to 17 maturation. The vertebrae showed no evidence that they had been exposed to fire, the report said, and it is very strange that no other bones were found in the allegedly careful evacuation of the basement of the house, noting that the house reportedly burned for only about half an hour or so. It is said that one would expect to find the full skeletons of the 5 children, rather than only 4 vertebrae. The bones, the report concluded, were most likely in the supply of dirt George used to fill in the basement to create the memorial for his children. The youngest and last surviving Sodder child, Sylvia, is now 69 and doesn't believe her siblings perished in the fire. When time permits, she visits crime-sleuthing websites and engages with people still interested in her family's mystery. Her very first memories are of that night in 1945, when she was 2 years old. She will never forget the sight of her father bleeding, or the terrible symphony of everyone's screams, and is no closer now to understanding why. With that, we've reached the end of today's video all about the case of the Sodder children. What do you think happened to the Sodder children? Get involved and let us know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video and found it interesting, make sure to leave a thumbs up so we know to make more for you. Also, subscribe to the channel for even more awesome videos just like this one. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time on Spooky Hut, where we always have tricks and treats for you.